again, and welcome back to another introduction to a Met Opera stream. Tonight is Wagner's Lohengrin, and I am Carol Anderson from Utah Opera. Happy to talk to you about this opera. I've done talks on 3 of the 7 Wagner operas that the Met has shared during this time of free streaming. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about Wagner. You can find information about him in particular. I'll talk a little bit about the context of Lohengrin in particular. I also want to talk about the source of the Lohengrin story. And then, of course, plenty of musical examples in talking about the story of Lohengrin. This is one of the Wagner operas I've actually done. I tended to work at sort of mid-level sized houses, so opera houses, and those tend not to have either the time ability or the pit size sometimes to do big Wagner operas. So at Utah Opera, our pit doesn't fit, plus our time constraints don't fit the length of some of these Wagner operas. So I've only done a couple. That's just been my experience. I've done Lohengrin, and I've done Flying Dutchman a couple of times. So Lohengrin is one of those longer ones. The runtime, I think it said, I didn't see what the Mets said, but when I did it at a different opera company, it was about 4:15, and that counted the 2 intermissions and such. So it's a commitment. The good thing about opera at your house is you can take as long an intermission as you want. Your intermission can even be overnight. So enjoy the fact that you can really curate your own opera experience any way you want. So as happens with many of these stories that Wagner set, it is sort of from an early legendary medieval source. And as many of those stories from that time period happen, they occur in different cultural things. So it's not just one story. It happens, it's like the character might be a trope that appears in several different sources. And that's just kind of the way things were pre-publication of books and novels, when they were passed around through troubadours and trouvères and various oral tradition methods of transmission. So Lohengrin comes from a medieval tale of a character known as the Swan Knight. In French, he's called Le Chevalier aux Cygnes, which is the Knight of the Swans. And then he has a very, I can't pronounce Middle English, but a similar title in the Middle English. So he showed up in many cultures, not just German cultures. The Swan Knight is a character who is a rescuer for a damsel in need. He travels in a boat drawn by swans. His only condition for his help is that the damsel never ask his name. So he's a mysterious knight. The character was assimilated into a story, epic poem story by Wolfram von Eschenbach, who was one of the Minnesingers of, I think he's like 11 something, so in the 12th century, who created poems and then transmitted this. They're not often, some of them are written down, but it wasn't widely, there weren't copies disseminated because this was before the printing press was invented. So Eschenbach was known for creating the story of Parsifal, which we've already seen on a Met live stream, or not a live stream, but a HD broadcast. And then he also is one of the forerunners of the Meistersingers who show up in that opera by that name, the Meistersingers of Nuremberg. So in the story of Parsifal, Lohengrin appears as a secondary character. He's the son of Parsifal and Condviramus, the queen that Parsifal marries. He travels via swan boat to rescue Elsa of Brabant. And this story, in this form, actually appears in a couple of later sources in the 13th and then in the 15th century. So again, none of these stories, it wasn't just like Harry Potter, where only J.K. Rowling wrote about Harry Potter. I mean, back in the day, there were not copyright, and stories were disseminated in different fashions. So Wagner was always interested in German mythology and German legend, and we see that in the way he set the subjects that he set. And then, of course, it gets into a complicated political, racial dialogue if we go further with that. We're not going to do that in this situation, but there are plenty of things you can look up to sort of see those discussions. But in 1845, Wagner spent a summer at a spa in Marienbad, which is in the northwest of what is now the Czech Republic. He had been incredibly taxed and stressed out, if you will, by his work in Dresden, Germany. And so it was prescribed for him to take the waters. And this was a thing that happened in the 19th century or earlier. You would go to a spa where there were like mineral baths and natural mineral baths, and they were believed to have healing properties. And thus you would go there and you would relax for several months and basically take a vacation with a little bit of a medical side thing. Kind of like going to a canyon ranch or something like that. So while he was at the spa in Marienbad, he was also doing a lot of leisure reading, if you will. But his leisure reading meant he was exploring art, philosophy, and also checking out German medieval literature. This is where he first got to know the epic of Lohengrin, and in particular the works of Wolfram von Eschenbach. So this planted seeds for many operas that came later on, and ultimately for The Ring, if you will, and Parsifal. So I want to mention King Ludwig II, the King of Bavaria. He became Wagner's most ardent patron. He first heard Wagner's music at the age of 15 in a production of Lohengrin, and then followed by Tannhäuser quickly after. So he was quite a bit younger than Wagner. Wagner tended to run afoul of people through the way he conducted his personal relationships. And he also had financial issues kind of throughout his life. And so King Ludwig kind of helped navigate the waters and keep him going. And ultimately, King Ludwig, through his patronage, made several premieres at the Bavarian State Opera possible, and he also made the building of the Bayreuth Opera House a reality when Wagner, that project, ran into financial troubles. King Ludwig is who we also know as Mad King Ludwig of Bavaria, and he built 2 beautiful castles in Bavaria. The most famous is Neuschwanstein, which is the inspiration for the Disney Cinderella castles. Neuschwanstein means new swan stone, literally in German. It is actually named after the Swan Knight Lohengrin. Mad King Ludwig was obsessed with Wagner's operas, and throughout, if you've ever taken a tour of that castle, you've seen there are frescoes of scenes of Wagner's operas, in particular Lohengrin. So very fond of that story. So the prelude to Act 1 is meant to represent the Holy Grail descending to earth. We don't know at the beginning of the opera, but as it comes out, we discover that Lohengrin is one of the knights of the Holy Grail. The Holy Grail, if you didn't see my talk on Parsifal, it had several forms throughout history, or throughout literature. It was several things. Sometimes it was a bowl, sometimes it was a cup. But it most popularly now is known as the cup that was used at the Last Supper by Christ. Then when Christ was, during the crucifixion, Christ was stabbed with a spear by the Romans, and supposedly Joseph of Arimathea, who actually buried Christ in his garden later on, collected the body of Christ, the blood of Christ in this chalice. So, and then it disappeared, and there was in medieval times, it was an item of lore and mystery, and knights would want to search for the Holy Grail. And of course, that goes on into more modern times, where you have Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, where Indiana Jones and his dad, Indiana Jones, were going to try to find it. Well, actually, his dad's not Indiana Jones, but Dr. Jones, Sean Connery, trying to find the Holy Grail in that story. So, Prelude to Act 1 starts in the stratosphere of the strings, and it's shimmery and magical, and that's meant to be the Holy Grail first coming out of heaven. And then I'm not going to play all the way through it. I'll do a bit of a jump, but about halfway through the second page of the piano reduction, which is probably a good two or so minutes into the piece, we finally reach earth, and we're in the bass clef. So I'm going to play a little bit of the beginning shimmery. And this is divided violins and flute. it works its way down. We get a little lower. Still up in the stratosphere. And then about a half page later, some bass presence now, so we're closer to earth, and the melody is now in a sort of mid-range instrument. So the prelude kind of tells the story there, sets it up. That tune will show up several times throughout the opera, so just be prepared to hear that again. So the Saxons are coming to Brabant. The Brabantians are gathered, and they are all waiting for King Henry of Saxony, who has been called upon to settle a dispute. Elsa of Brabant has been accused by Talramund, that Friedrich Talramund, who was the guardian, let me back up. Prior to the show, the young brother of Elsa, Gottfried, was what am I trying to say? He was the, I can't go back now. I can't start over. He was the ruler-elect or whatever. And Friedrich of Telramund was the regent or the guardian who was sort of taking care of him. Friedrich accuses Elsa of having plotted for the murder of Gottfried so that she could become the Duchess of Brabant. So Telramund is contesting her claim to the throne and wants to have her deposed and take her place. Well, that was hard to get through. Glad you guys like me. So King Henry's solution to this dispute is to call for a trial by combat, and whoever wins the combat will be the new ruler. Back in the day, women did not fight for themselves, so Elsa needs to find a champion. She goes into this dreamy state and is talking about when she imagined she had a vision of a champion who would come to her. And so she sets that up, and then she begins to describe the champion, the way he comes in splendid glowing raiment, and he's handsome and he has a sword and all these things. And we have this music to herald that. So about 4 bars. You recognize that. Oh, I'm in the wrong key though. Here it's in a different half step. In Licht Waffen Schein ein Ritter da. And Ritter da means a knight comes close to there. He has a golden horn, a sword, so he comes through the air. This is the knight who will become my champion. Soll mein Streiter sein. And everyone says, oh, let's hope that will happen, that heaven will send that person. So they call for her champion, and he doesn't come. Then finally she prays earnestly that her champion appear. And she says, Lass mich ihn sehen, wie ich ihn sah. Let me see him now as I saw him in my dream. And it has a really magical modulation at this moment. So she says, let me see, lass mich ihn sehen. went to some weird spot into my, there we go. Here we are again. Exactly the same music from her aria, but this time we're hearing the chorus all joins in, and it's an 8-part chorus. So two sopranos, two soprano sections, 2 alto sections, 2 tenors, 2 basses. It becomes a double chorus a little bit later, where they're singing separate stuff. But here it's little interjections, and they're saying "Sieht, sieht, welch ein seltsam Wunder." What a wonder I'm seeing. See that, see that. Wie ein Schwan. What? It's a swan. Ein Schwan zieht eine Nachen dort heran. A swan is pulling a little boat along. Ein Richter drin. There's a knight in there. And so it's very exciting, and lots of ba-ba. It's very complicated music at this moment. And then we get into these bigger choruses where they sort of, as everyone kind of figures out what happens, they start singing more unified stuff. They sing Das Auge vergeht vor solchem Glanz. Our eyes go away before such an amazing glance from this hero. So this is the appearance of our Swan Knight, who we know is Lohengrin, but nobody else knows that's his name. So, funny little story, there was a well-known Moravian tenor named Leo Slezak. He later became a film comedian, I discovered, so did his side hustle later on. He was waiting in the wings to board the Swan boat for his entrance. The driver engineer of the Swan boat, the stagehand who was controlling the Swan boat, jumped his entrance and headed on stage without the tenor in it. So the tenor looked around to whoever was around, the stagehands nearby, and said, "Wann geht die nächste Schwan?" Which means, when is the next swan coming? So waiting for another one to come along. He missed his train, so he's going to wait for the next one. So the Swan Knight comes in, declares himself the champion for Elsa, and fights combat with Telramund. He wins, and everyone hails him as the savior of Elsa von Brabant. And he says, "Durch Gottes Sieg ist jetzt dein Leben mein." Through God's raising up of me, I'm sort of his desire, is jetzt now your life mine. He says that to Telramund at the end of the combat, which is very dramatic. And that da 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 da, that'll come up quite a bit later on. This is the music when he wins, and then he says, "By God's will, your life is mine." And then everyone says, "Hail to you." Including the King of Saxony. And then this is Elsa's rapturous melody when it made that key change, that she is rejoicing that she has been saved by the appearance of this mysterious and, of course, handsome man. So, second act comes along. Telramund has been banished from the kingdom, but he's still doing this in the corners, and he has with him Ortrud to help. Ortrud is a pagan witch. So she actually prays to the gods, the pagan gods, Odin and Freya, for their help in securing the kingdom from Telramund. And the music that starts this scene with Telramund and Ortrud plotting is totally different. I'm going to play a little faster because otherwise we'll be here forever, because it's mäßig langsam, which is, reasonably slow, and low strings. Dark and ominous and sinister. I did a little cut. winds, which always sounds very ooh. Sounds like sinister and dark night. And then more of the same. So this is for what introduces their plotting. And then we hear during that moment, there's trumpets from inside they're outside, they're in a different location, but they can hear the festival music playing from the Palace of Brabant. There's a big party going on to celebrate the fact that Elsa was defended and now they're going to get married, Elsa in the Mystery Night. So there's trumpets from all different directions. I remember doing this in a production, and I was in the farthest corner of the building, which was a very large building. It was like 4 city blocks wide, and I was in the farthest corner. So I had to conduct almost a full beat ahead to be with the orchestra at the front of the house, because I was probably 50 to 75 yards away from the conductor, working on a monitor. It's kind of crazy. Goes along with the crazy things you do in opera. So then we get to the next scene in this second act. There, we're about to go into the nuptial mass, or whatever, the nuptial ceremony for Lohengrin and Elsa. Ortrud appears, and right before that, to Elsa, and she not appears like poof, but she comes to Elsa and she plants a seed of doubt. She's like, you should find out who this guy is, if he loves you, blah blah blah. And so Elsa says, get away, I'm not going to listen to you, I trust him. And Telramund and Ortrud are banished from the kingdom, so again thrown out. And then everyone processes into the church for the wedding. So Act 3 begins after the wedding. The happy couple is now being escorted by the chorus into their bedchamber. And this was a thing that happened in medieval times. Everybody would sort of have a festival thing, escort them into the bedchamber, and then leave them to do what needed to be done. Fill that in as you will. But we have some very famous music that happens at this moment. You'll recognize it, I'm sure of it. Play the Bridal March. I'm sorry, I'm reading music off of 5 staves. So my brain just went into 3 different places all at once. So anyway, mostly you recognize that is the Bridal March that people use for Here Comes the Bride. And this is what they sing as they escort them into their nuptial chamber. Then they're left alone, and Ortrud finally gives in to the doubts that Ortrud has planned. Elsa finally gives into the doubts that Ortrud has planted in her mind. She says to Lohengrin, she cajoles him and says, when we're just alone, when it's just you and me, I love you so much. Could you please just share your name so that I can use it when we're alone? I won't tell anyone else. Before he can answer her, Telramund and some of his knights rush in to attack him. Telramund is killed in the struggle. And this is the music where the fight has just happened. So she says, Holdermann, he says, Elsa, was willst du wagen? What do you want from me? And he says, listen what I must now ask you. Tell me your name. And he says, stop. And then, where did you come from? Stop. What is your, what are you? Stop. Oh, what are you doing? And then, so we have this music building up. This is Halt ein, woher der Fahrt? Who are you? What are you? Oh no, what have you done? And we have this is Telramund coming in. Telramund is killed. Then Lohengrin is like, what have you done? This is terrible. And we have shocked music. This is just the timpani. It's pitched, but really empty and hollow. Then we have some Tellerman plotting music, as if they're acknowledging that even though Tellerman's dead, his damage was still done. And then he says, Nun ist all unser Glück dahin. Now is all our happiness gone. And then she says, Mighty God, please have mercy on me. This is all very sad. So now Lohengrin decides that it's time finally to tell the story of who he is to everyone before he leaves, because he says, I have to leave now. So he says, in a far land, there's a castle called Monsalva, and that is the place of the Grail Knights. There's a temple in there, there's holy things, and then there's the purest men there, but they have to remain unknown. If they are revealed, then they have to return to, when they're out and about the country, if they're revealed their identity and their origin, they have to return to Monsalva. So he says, I'm going to have to leave. And this is that music again. We have more of that. So, as Ortrud reveals at this moment, she appears, she's still out there. She says to Elsa, I'm going to tell you what happened. I actually enchanted young Gottfried into the form of this swan. So we have this music. If he had stayed here longer, your brother would have been revealed, which is very sad to Elsa. She's like, oh no, I've ruined everything. But instead, Lohengrin prays, and the swan does turn back into Gottfried. And so we have more of this music, and this is so there's that music again. This time it's in a little bit different key, but and different orchestration, but still we've got the Lohengrin Holy Grail Swan theme, whatever you want to call it. So now that there's no swan, instead a dove descends from heaven and takes over the boat, and Lohengrin departs. Elsa, of course, is devastated to lose Lohengrin, but rejoices in having her brother back. So it's a happy, sad ending, I guess. But really, some great, spectacular music, some things you know. I mean, I remember, I've always known that was the Bridal Chorus from Lohengrin, but it's sort of fun when you get to do the show and you get to hear it in context. It's really kind of a beautiful piece that we're so familiar with it, we think it's a little bit corny, but in the context of the show, it's really quite stunning. So, nice long one. Sorry about that. Sometimes I get a little long-winded. So the good news is you can start the opera whenever you want. You're not bound to a curtain time. So thanks for joining me. Thank you to all of you who support live music. We look forward to being back. It's really, we miss it so much, being able to perform and make music for you when you're in the audience. And so we look forward to that. Until the time when we're able to meet up, as we're starting to open things up again, be smart, make good choices, take care of each other, and always wash your hands. Thank you so much.